In this video I'll be fishing the river Great Ouse for pike and chub. I'll be fishing over 2 days. One of the days was mild, calm and overcast, and the other day was a complete contrast, bitterly cold, windy and rainy when the temperature didn't get above 3 degrees C. In this swim the main flow is quite close to my own bank, and although I've never caught a chub here before, I thought it looked quite a good chub spot, so I threw in a few free offerings as soon as I got there. I cast my paternoster rig for pike out at the end of the swim. I'm using a homemade float, and I'll go into details about the rest of the rig later on in the video. My first cast was without a bait on it to get an idea of the depth. I adjusted the depth, making it a bit deeper, sliding my stop knot a bit further up the line. I baited up with a small frozen mackerel, taking care to put the hook with a barb on into the fish. I'm using a slight variation of the Jardine snap tackle with 2 treble hooks on the trace. In this version the hooks are semi-barbless. This is my paternoster rig, fished over depth to suspend the bait above the bottom. I take care when casting it out to ensure that there's not a tangle. I'm fishing with the Delkin bite indicator and the bait runner on. I don't want to be late striking the fish. I don't want to deep hook a pike. You can just see my bung on the surface as I zoom in, although it seems to have lost the colour on this bit of film. I'm just going to lower my chub rod in front of me where this bit of current is. Often people overlook fishing right in front of them, as they think the fish are going to be further away, but you have to be careful not to make any noise when fishing this close. I pay out line as it's quite deep here. I'm putting it on the rod rest with the Delkin and the homemade indicator on it. The homemade indicator's got drilled bullets on it that can slide up and down and vary the resistance to the taking fish according to the current that I'm fishing in. Now I can sit back, have a sandwich and wait and see if there's any fish around. It wasn't long before I had a knock, struck and was into a good fish. I had to play it hard and keep it out of the rushes in front of me. What a lovely chub, and with an almost perfect scale pattern. If you haven't subscribed already, please don't forget to subscribe. I'm releasing it from the landing net, making sure it's well recovered. I'm casting it out again in the same place to see if there's another one around. On the chub that I caught, I did notice a slight tremor just before the knot that I struck. You have to strike them quite early, as sometimes confidently feeding chub can take it down to their throat teeth and bite you off. Something's been having a go at my mackerel, and it's not what I'm after. This looks like crayfish chewing it. So to solve the problem, I'm going to put something tougher on, an old eel. After a while, I wound my rods in and walked upstream a bit to bait up a few swims to have a go in for chub later. I'm going to recast my rods and start off by touch ledgering for the chub. And now I'm reverting back to using an indicator. Now I'm putting a mackerel back on, as they didn't seem to want the eel. My bung's moving upstream a bit. I think I've got to run on my pike rod. I'm going to have to try and net it underneath my chub rod. It's a long thin pike, and although I didn't weigh it, it would otherwise have been quite a bit heavier. I cast out again with another mackerel. I threw a few baits in for my next but one cast with my chub rod, and for my next cast I cast right to the other side to where I baited up a while ago. As it was getting dark, I did have one more run on my pipe rod that I missed. I then moved up to a swim that I baited up earlier and concentrated solely on the chub. I didn't get any on my first cast, so I cast out again and sat and waited to touch the edge ring. This is one of my favourite parts of fishing, a nice sunset and sitting there peacefully waiting for a chub to bite. Just before or just after dusk is a very good chance to see or hear wild birds or animals that come out at this time. On my next cast I caught a chub with a split tail. The split tail had been caught earlier on in the fish's life by perhaps an otter. I also caught this chub from one of the other swims I baited up. I'd left my pike rod set up from the trip before. I also have homemade protectors made from an old drinks bottle that I wrap round the trace so as it doesn't get tangled up with the other rods. This is my homemade pike bung with the sliding stop bead just above it. This is a Hobbycraft pipe cleaner wrapped round my reel seats that I use as a keeper ring. I also keep my chub rod set up. It's got a pretty simple rig on it, a wireframe cage feeder, a swivel linked to some lighter line and a size 8 hook. I'm baiting up a couple of spots for my chub fishing. I'll also carry on chub fishing after dark. This is my paternoster rig set up, a sliding stop bead, my homemade pike bung, the trace underneath that, then a drill bullet, quite a large drill bullet to help keep the trace away from the rest of the tackle, a rubberized stop bead, a swivel linked to some lighter line and a weight to hold it all in place. I'm starting off with a small mackerel. My first cast was to check the depth, and after that I needed to adjust it by making it a bit deeper by moving my sliding stop knot. This pike had also got a chewed tail. My pike bring has drifted down in front of my chub rod. That's partly because the flow is increasing with the rain that we've had. I've got a pike run. This is a really nicely conditioned pike with impressive markings. I cast out again in case there was another one around. I was still carrying on fishing for the chub, trying to get my bait as close as I could to the tree on the other bank. This was pretty difficult as my fingers were really freezing. Eventually I managed to get a decent cast in. Even after such a bitterly cold day, I got a magnificent sunset to watch as I continued my fishing. I carried on fishing into darkness and was eventually rewarded with this lovely 6 pound 7 ounce chub. If you haven't subscribed already, please don't forget to subscribe.